Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got my buddy on, Mr. Ryan Moose Glitsky. What's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. Looking forward to bullshitting.
I know, man. I hear you, dude. It's nice to have it's nice to have a PA boy on, man. I had a good run of like a bunch of my buddies from Wisconsin, and I haven't had a PA boy, PA buddy.
Yeah,
that's right,
yeah,
man. It's like, yeah, dude. It's good to see your face, man. How the hell you been, dude?
Good, real good. Typical, living the American dream. You know,
yeah.
Go to work every day, go to the gym, and chase whitetails.
That's right, man. You're chasing some turkeys too, man. I saw. Well, before we talk turkeys for a second, I saw your son was murdering it on the trout stream, dude.
I tell you what, yeah, he's actually whitetails. 365, 24/7. But he has lit a fire in me to fly fish. I will tell you that. So I think I'm gonna start fly fishing with him a little bit. He is man, that kid in fishing, he absolutely loves it. I've been trying to get him out a little more and more. Like I said, he's kind of lit a little fire in me, a little something different than the whitetails. Get out in the stream a little bit and catch some native trout, some smallies, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. It's what's funny is like my stepdad growing up was a big trout fisherman, fly fisherman specifically. Yeah. And I just never got into it. Not because I wasn't interested. I think as a kid, I wasn't interested because it just seemed way too hard for me. And I got a couple buddies that fly fish, and I've wanted to dabble in it, but I'm a realist, man. It's like I need to fly fishing hobby like I need another hole in my head. You know what I mean?
Same
like
here. Yeah.
Between whitetails, the podcast, jiu-jitsu, it's like I got no more time to add something. And I know it's one of those things where I would just fall down the rabbit hole because all the guys that I know who either do it like pretty consistently or have done it in the past, they're like, man, it's a lot like archery hunting. They're like, when you get deep into it and you start to figure out, you start to play with like how the water's eddying around and like different hatches and like what's going to be the food, like the primary food source, like at different moments of the season and stuff like that. It's very much like hunting whitetails with a bow.
It's getting bad.
Yeah.
I can say nothing will ever replace my whitetails. Nothing, but I look at it like, I'm in the woods pretty much every Saturday in the off season scouting. We're off Sundays, so I might be on the water a little bit more.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it'd be nice because you could still like walk along a stream and get a line wet and do a little scouting on a Sunday. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a nice way to kind of stay involved.
Something a little relaxing. These whitetails can be a little stressful at times, as we know. So sometimes it's nice to have a hobby, a passion. It's maybe a little less stressful.
Yeah, that was honestly kind of how the jiu-jitsu thing started for me. It was like, I mean, I've always wanted to do it, but it was one of those things I've talked about this with Tony Peterson and stuff in the past where, I think, at least for me, sometimes I get so wrapped around something and I start to suck the fun out of it for myself because I get so like, it'll start to make me mad and just things like that. Right. And so I needed something, I needed to not replace, but I needed something to spend some time doing that would give me some distance from it. So whenever when I would do it, it would be like, this is the greatest thing ever. You know what I mean? Where it's like, if I go out and scout 9 miles or whatever, and I don't find anything, I don't come home and be like, geez, that was a waste of a freaking day. You know what I mean? Like where now it's like Saturday I went out and did 9 miles and I didn't find anything new necessarily. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was a spot that I hung 2 cameras in that was pretty far pretty far piece, like back into this area. It was like a little over, I think the closest camera was roughly 2 miles from like where you park, and then like another camera that was like about a half mile from that, and had really high hopes for that pool. And it's kind of funny how things work out, because as I'm there and I'm grabbing those cameras and checking them, and I just set those last year, like a year ago, never checked them, never went in to hunt the area. It was just purely, I went in with a buddy of mine because he was familiar with that area, and he was kind of showing me around. And I was like, I'll throw a camera here and I'll throw a camera over here, and I'll just let it sit for the year, and we'll see, what's going on. Now, he has hunted it in the past, and he was like, he's seen good bucks in there, historically, but he hadn't been in there in a couple of years. And so went to kind of pull the cameras, and I'm flipping through on my phone, like looking at, what I can see, like in SD cards or whatever, really quick before I get to the next camera. And I was like, man, I was expecting to see like being that far back away from like where you're going to see a lot of people walk in and not a lot of pressure tip, and stuff like that. I was like, man, there's going to be a slob on here. I know it. You know what I mean? Like just like a jaw dropper. And when I flipped through real quick, there wasn't anything that really caught my eye. I was like, man, and then I went and checked the second camera, and that one was kind of like, it was kind of a flyer camera. It wasn't set on a scrape, and you and I both are scrape guys, where it's like we like to set our stuff on a scrape. But this was a spot that kind of connected two swamps that was like a pinch. Okay. And I was like, man, you talk about a setup for like a funnel. You know what I mean? I was like, and I didn't really think I'd get anything until like last week of October through like November, and definitely like the second half of November, like that late rut. I figured that would be like when it would really pop off, and just nothing. I think there was like one okay buck. And so I was kind of not disappointed, and then went around, did the rest of my scouting and stuff like that. And usually like on a day like that, doing 9 miles and not getting what I wanted, I would been coming home and like, man, that kind of sucked. But I was like happier than a pig in shit the whole day. You know what I mean? And then I did come home and throw some stuff up on the computer, and there was probably at least four deer that I misjudged on my phone when I finally got a good look at the picture.
That happened. Yeah.
Where I'm like, I mean, there was nothing that was like jaw dropper, but there was like, 4 bucks on there that were like 130 plus, I would say, roughly. Give or take. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I totally get it, man. Sometimes you need something just to take your mind off of things. Yeah. For a reset. 100%. But how was, before we jump into kind of talking, making a plan, because for people that are listening, that's, if you've ever listened to Ryan talk, whether it was on another podcast or whether it was him in person at any of the mobile roadshow stuff, events that he's done, you know that he is or if you follow him on Instagram, he's in the woods pretty much every weekend, and he's making a plan. Like that's how it works. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot today, is how we take all the stuff we learned through trail cameras and postseason scouting, not so much about how we're scouting, but like, how do we take that information and how do we start to actually think about it and put pieces together to start to make a plan for fall. But before that, you killed a really good deer last year in PA, right? If I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then you were also, did you go to Iowa last year? Was last year Iowa?
Yes. I went to Iowa last year. I killed a decent buck here. 3.5-year-old mountain buck, nothing to take to the big buck, thing. But you know what? I was happy with it. It was a good day. Spent with my dad, everything else. So it worked out great. So I was on a pretty big high going to Iowa, and I went to a different area this year in Iowa, and I had high hopes. And I told somebody, I think I already was writing a check out to the taxidermist, kind of being a little cocky and arrogant maybe a little bit.
Right.
And I got my balls busted, man.
I mean, I was texting with you.
You say it. I mean, there was a lot of positive things, but it was a pretty hard farm to hunt. The majority of it was all cedars. So it was interesting to hunt, but about 3-4 days in it, I was on deer. That wasn't a problem. Saw a lot of deer. Just the quality of deer I go to Iowa for, I didn't see that. I passed some deer up at the beginning, and then I started putting things together. Like I ended up screwing up on about 150 incher, just dumb rookie mistake by me, but never saw anything over that big. So I got a little frustrated. What I wanted to go to Iowa wasn't there. It wasn't so much the property's fault. I went too early for this area. What I learned after this, there was actually one of the gentlemen that was hunting the property killed a booner on it. So they were there. Just I hunted, I think around Halloween, first part of November there, and I think I was there just about a week and a half too early, to be honest with you. The big ones they were already locked down on some of them does. It was a high density of area. I actually saw about 250 deer in about 10 days. Just wasn't seeing everything I was getting opportunity at or I'd screw up on was like at 130, 140. Other than that 150, I screwed up and I saw one other one about 150. Just didn't see the caliber of deer. But what I took away from that hunt, I got my balls kicked. It's Iowa. You're almost expected to kill. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I got my ass. I ended up on the last day there. I hit a buck, didn't find it, so that kind of was like, made a long drive home. But no trail cameras. I never stepped foot on that property. Yeah. And I was on deer immediately. Had opportunities immediately. Some deer I passed up. So I can keep my head up. That's how I look at it. I went to a brand new piece of property. It was a pretty tough area to hunt. But I felt pretty good afterwards after the dust kind of settled. That what? I went in there, did what I had to do. Now on, I kind of took from it. You got to practice what you preach. You go to new areas like that. That farm there is about 550 acres, I believe. I should have took 2 days and blew that farm up. Should have went in and just blew that farm up. Went in and just covered that farm. Found the 3-4, the best of the best. Went in, set up, and killed. That's what it was too much chasing my tail a little bit. I wasn't very aggressive like I need to be at times. Like I said, I was on deer, but looking back on, instead of wasting a handful of days really getting into the farm, should have just blew it up for a day or two. Just went in there and found everything, not being able to scout.
That's the hardest part, man, is like when you're on that short time, you sometimes start to second guess yourself a little bit. You know what I mean? Because you're trying not to make any mistakes. Because like in your mind, you're thinking to yourself, I'm only here for 7 days or however many days you have, and you're like, man, in those 7, it's still deer hunting regardless of what state you're in. You know what I mean? And deer are going to do deer things, and shots show up and then they go away in seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and so sometimes you go in and you're trying to be too careful and you're trying to thread the needle so finely, whereas you really just need to kind of do what you do well. You know what I mean? Like, and just kind of stick to your. And Chad and I have talked about that like the past probably 2 years, because when he killed that bull in Idaho, he hunted that bull like he was almost like he was hunting whitetails to a degree. Like he was like, I'm going to hunt them just how I know how to hunt, and that's how he killed a bull. And similarly, me in Kansas, it was, see them do something. I'm just going to go in and try to kill this deer in the like where he's showing me he's at, you know what I mean? Where I just took like the guesswork out of it. And I was like, if I mess it up, I mess it up, but I got to go try it, And I think a lot of times we talk ourselves out of good scenarios,
As I said, once you start to get into a hunt like that, things aren't what you expected. Then the mental game, man. It's either what happened to me was, I'm a very confident individual. Very. It's probably one of the few times that I kind of lost my confidence, and then I had buddies like messaging me like, "Dude, you're not having fun." Like you can see when I was posting up stories and that. Yeah. And day 2, 3, 4, I let it snowball. It started getting in my head, and then it just started snowballing. And then I was there for 10 days, and to be honest with you, it got to the point when I hit that buck in the last day, I just want to go home with my family. I was done. Like, I did not give a shit about whitetails anymore. It totally just, I lost my confidence. I lost everything. And I'm at the point, I never really thought that would happen to me, being very confident with whitetails and that. But I just let things snowball, and I learned an awesome lesson from it. It's probably the best thing that could have happened to me, to be honest with you, because I sat back at home and I refocused. And going into this season, whole new ball game. I feel $1 million better. Like after the last 2 years, you know how it is, social media, podcasts. You get wrapped up in this stuff, start chasing that prize. And I tell you what, that was the best thing that probably happened to me, is coming home with an unpunched Iowa tag, because I got to reset, refocus. Now I'm back in the game, I feel.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. It's like we can sometimes put way too much pressure on ourselves. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, because I even mentioned it on the show at one point. And again, going back to like why I started doing jiu-jitsu, was to kind of like remove some of that, to where it's like, it's not all day, every day for me. It's like, I put it in its place and it has a priority in my life. And, but it's not the end all be all. And I don't care what anyone else is doing or killing. I mean, my buddies, of course, I keep tabs on what they're doing and hope they have success, and we talk and whatever. But I'm not worried about what someone thinks, whether or not I'm having success. I don't really care, And once I think you get that, it's like you just get this freedom to just kind of go out and do your thing. You know what I mean? So then all of a sudden, being aggressive doesn't matter anymore, because like, well, if I screw this up, who cares? Like, I'm just going to go do the hunt and figure it out,
You know what I realized? This is crazy. is, I've been blessed to kill some pretty good whitetails, but I don't consider myself a big buck killer. I consider myself a deer hunter. And that's what I
Right.
come
Yeah.
to realize when I come in from Iowa.
Preach.
Big or small, does or whatever, man, I'm a deer hunter.
That was
That's my mindset that's going into this year.
that is a beautiful place to be, man. Cause that was exactly kind of my mindset shift, like over the past probably 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of came at a weird, it wasn't even like the person said it to me, like giving me advice or anything. I was just, Tony Peterson and I were doing a podcast together, and we were just kind of and I don't remember if we said it on the podcast or if we were just talking about it after, because he just said something to me about, just go deer hunt. He's like, just go be a deer hunter. And I've said this on here before, and he just said, you'll be surprised when you just go deer hunt, how quickly tags start to fill and big deer start to hit the ground.
I just went hunting, man.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
it.
get tied up in the thermals of this and on this. That, I just went freaking hunting.
Yeah, dude. And I think sometimes like you just have to get that, it's like anything, like time behind the string and time letting an arrow off the string, makes a big difference in being like going from hunting a hunter to a killer, like being able to flip that mode. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like whenever he and I talked about that, it was literally like 2 weeks later, it was Thanksgiving, and I did a hunt around here, and I kayaked into this spot and I killed a doe. Cause I was just like, I'm going to just kill something today. You know what I mean? And I was in a spot where I typically don't kill does because it's like one of my better buck spots. It's actually where I killed my buck this year, And it was kind of funny because I killed that doe, and it was almost like a dry run to a degree because she did exactly what that buck did this year. And so I kind of knew how it was all going to play out before it played out. Yep. And I was like, I'm going to shoot him right here. And that's where he walked, and boom. I almost shot that buck in the identical spot where that doe was standing, like almost to awesome. A T. You know what I mean? And so, and that stuff starts to snowball, man. Like, you know what I mean? You just start to get confidence, and you stop caring about making mistakes, and you just start going, I'm making decisions. I'm just going to let it rip, and that's when good things start to happen, man. It's like a basketball player or whatever getting in the zone where it's like all of a sudden that rim gets like 4 foot wide and you feel like you can't miss, And then all of a sudden, it shrinks down real quick and then you're back,
Yeah, there's always reality. Especially whitetails, they tend to humble us a lot.
Yeah. I'm kind of waiting. Like I'm super stoked on this year just because I'm just really looking forward to it. But it was funny as I was walking through the woods yesterday, or this past weekend. I was thinking to myself, like I was just thinking about making plans for this coming year and just thinking about what I saw while I was walking through and like what I was seeing on trail camera and starting to make a little bit of a plan in my head. Like I had already started planning like probably like 2 weeks prior. And as I was doing that, I was starting to think back to like last year, and I was like, I filled 2 tags and hunted 5 days. It's like that, and I was like, I may never do that in my life again. You know what I mean? Like have that kind of sit rate,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just mentally talking about the mental part of it. It was mentally like, I had turned the page on the previous season already where I was like looking forward to this season, like last season's in rear mirror, had a great time. It was awesome. Yeah. Like couldn't have asked for better. But that moment was when like this past weekend when I was like, okay, you got to get ready for a grind because, like you got to prepare yourself for it to be like last year was as easy as it gets. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of leading up to it, but like the execution, it was as easy as it gets. Right. And I've got some opportunities in front of me this year where I'm like, this one's going to test me. Right. Yeah. And I may not fill a tag this year, you know what I mean? And that'll be okay. But this one's going to test me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so dude, so let's transition and talk about that since I'm talking about making a plan. So, so I want to talk to you. We both run a lot of trail cameras, right? Mm-hmm. Well, so first to start there, like, so how many trail cameras are you typically running in a year? Because I want to get to the idea of organizing trail camera information, and I want to give people like a sense of scope as to how many trail cameras you might be running or I might be running, and how much data we're kind of compiling.
Yeah, I run roughly around 30, and I cover. Now, those 30 are covering a pretty large area, say roughly 5 to 6 counties, in Pennsylvania. I do cover a lot of ground to find decent bucks, So if you think about 30 may sound a lot, but when you're covering tens of thousands of acres, maybe it's on the low end. But I've kind of got to the point where now that I'm pretty confident when I put a camera on a location, I'm going to get a mature buck.
Right.
So I don't need 70, 80 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Those 30, I'm putting, say I have 10,000 acres I'm walking into, and I put 6 to 8 cameras on that 10,000 acres. Those are going in the best spots in that 10,000 acres that I feel that I'm going to get a mature buck. And I don't say this to be cocky or arrogant, but I will get mature bucks on those cameras. Yeah. That's just that when I see the scrape or a ditch crossing, like I said, majority of the time it's going to be a scrape. And if I see like a creek crossing or something that really sticks out to me, but like I said, a scrape particularly, when I see it, I'm like, it's rare I get fooled anymore. It's like I'm going to pick up a shooter on this scrape. So
yeah. No, I'm right around the same number of cameras. Like it for me, it depends. It's weird because I don't necessarily always put out all of my cameras. It's like I put out as many as I think that I need. And sometimes during the course of the year, and it also depends on like the type of scouting that I'm doing. Like this year, for example, I'm not doing a lot of finding new spots this year because I've been playing with this one piece, this Big Woods piece, for 3 years. I had a couple hunts last year, a decent encounter last year there, and now I kind of know where I need to be, and so now I'm not necessarily finding brand new spots there because I'm still kind of in the process of learning the spots that I do have. When I'm walking, if I find something new, sure, I'm hanging a camera, but a lot of my intel gathering there now is more, I need to know these areas that I've found that are good. I need to know them more intimately. You know what I mean?
Level. Yes, the micro level. I need to start usually it's all macro. That's how I look at it.
Yep.
These areas are on a macro level, I find. And then it's the process of a year or two, trail cameras, ass time, where you really break it down on a micro level. You go back in after that first, second year in your postseason, adjusting your camera setups or whatever to really fine tune that on a micro level. To me, that's when you find the kill tree in that particular area.
The kill tree. And then the other thing that I'm doing too, and I'm curious if you do this as well, but when I hang that camera, like I'm similar to you, where it's like I use a lot of primary scrapes, right? Yeah. And so usually when I hang a camera, it's not very often that it's a bust. Even that one I was talking about earlier that I put in that pinch, like there were still 2 deer on that camera that I would shoot. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like it was a complete bust. It just didn't have what I thought it was going to have and didn't have the frequency I thought it was going to have. Right. So that one got yanked, but usually I'm only kind of deeming spots good whenever I get the kind of deer that I want to see on the camera. You know what I mean? Like that's what tells me, it's like, yep, good spot. Mature deer are spending time here in whatever time of year. Sometimes it's late season, sometimes it's early season, sometimes it's the rut. Yeah. And then I kind of know what the spot might be good for, you know what I mean? As opposed to, just going like, oh, it's a good spot. It's like, no, it's a time specific kind of opportunity, right? And the good deer are going to be here. So you're hanging them primarily on ditch crossings and primarily, I guess, scrapes.
Yeah, about 90. I'd say about 90% are going to be 90+% going to be on scrapes. It's that creek crossing with a really tight pinch in a certain area that I feel that I'm going to get some great intel on some movement.
Right. Okay. So whenever you find, for knowing that you're, and I kind of know what your answer, because you and I've talked about scrapes before, but I'll ask the question so people will hear the answer. When you say like, I know that this spot's going to produce a mature buck, right? And we're talking about a scrape, let's just say, right? Mm-hmm. How do you know, like what is it that tells you that that's the spot where a mature buck's going to visit? Security
cover. It's always cover based. Security cover can be the habitat, like vegetation wise, clear cut, mountain laurel, greenbrier, something like that. Or it could be topo. Steep terrain. I look at that also. Both of those, if I get scrapes around, and if they both line up, that diversity's there, both, the terrain and habitat, I'm really getting excited,
Right.
But those are the things I look for. And if those pieces of the puzzle are there, I'm typically, I said, I feel pretty confident when I look at that scrape, I mean, I do want to see I want that scrape to, a lot of times the lick and branch stuff to have some age to it. Not necessarily all the time, but I want to see that too. Kind of read the tracks, the dropping, some other things around that to really make it sure. But that's kind of, like I said, security cover in the form of vegetation or something like that, or terrain is key in my opinion. Especially, like I said, we hunt Pennsylvania. If people are outside of Pennsylvania or hunt the Midwest, don't understand what pressure is when it comes to gun pressure. It can be insane, the gun pressure here. It's like a small war, and to get those deer to two-year-olds, just to get to 2.5 is a struggle for them. But to get to 3, 4, 5 years old, man, you got to have that security cover in some form to get those mature bucks. And that's why I said, that's why I'm keying on off my camera locations near those areas, so a mature buck feels comfortable coming in.
Yeah. It's funny because, people will ask, I was talking to a buddy of mine once, and, he hunts a lot of farm country in general. And we were talking one day, he's like, how the hell do you get like mature deer on camera in the middle of the freaking woods? Like in the big woods, like, right. Cause most of his like big deer that he gets on camera will be like near a food plot or something like that. You know what I mean? Yep. And I said the same thing. I was like, I find thick places that are nasty. I was like, and it's not like, I don't go out necessarily saying when I'm scouting, like, hey, I'm going to look for scrapes today. Like, no, I'm just going to the areas that look to me, like to your point, between topography and habitat, right? That look like a mature deer might want to spend time there, or deer in general, going back to being a deer hunter, right? Because deer's same thing, like mature bucks, yes, they act differently, right? But they're all looking for the same types of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like the mature buck act different, yes, but they also act the same too. They're an edge animal, transition, edges, cover, that stuff. Like I tell guys, go walk the edge of something. You're going to find sign, read it, and work off it. That's the same thing I do a lot of my time is I start working those transitions, working those edges. You read the sign. You'll see sign. That's not where you want to necessarily be, but that's going to lead you to where you need to be a lot of times.
Yeah, exactly. That's the advice I've always given too. Cause I'm like, there's no magic bullet for finding like these great trail camera setups or just like the good sign or whatever. I was like, what it is like, just make it simple. Like make it as simple as possible. If you don't know anywhere else to start on the edge of something, follow that edge. I promise you will run into deer sign. You'll run into a scrape. You'll run into a rub. You'll run into something, and then just follow that line of wherever that's headed. Right.
Yeah. And more. Dude, I've even
gotten on deer trails and walked deer trails. Like, oh man, that's a pretty good deer trail. And I just start walking it. Right. Like, there's no shame in my game. You know what I mean? I keep it as simple as possible.
And I tell guys what I'm always looking for. It doesn't matter if it's in my kill tree or made my camera set up. The more things coming together in that location, diversity wise, to me, it usually produces pretty good results. I mean, outside influence of hunting pressure and different things happen. Absolutely. But typically when I get in really good areas, there's a lot going on in my best spots.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. There's always, and the funny thing is we sometimes, if you've been doing it a little while, you sometimes will just see all those things and immediately know, and you don't really think about all the different variables that are kind of coming together. You just see it and you're like, and you just think to yourself, yeah, this is the spot, Yeah. But whenever you step back and you think about it, if you're examining an area, like you hung some cameras or whatever the case is, and you start to get the caliber of deer that you want to see, you start to think to yourself, well, why am I getting this caliber? Like, I knew that scrape was good, right? But then you start to really kind of look and go, you start to look back, you start to look and go, all right, well, what's the terrain features around there? Is there something that's pushing these deer from here, from wherever they're coming from to this spot? It's like, well, what's the food source around here? Is there an acorn drop around here in the fall? Is there?
So important. Once you find the spot, you got to ask yourself why. Because two things that's going to do. First off, that's going to help you down the road to find more. The second thing is, when you ask why, that prevents you from screwing the spot up. Because you got to figure out what's going on there. Because if you're not asking yourself why, you find the spot. I don't care if it's your trail camera or your kill tree or whatever it is. If you're not asking yourself why, if you access that area wrong or you do something wrong with the wrong wind, wrong thermals, if you're not putting that all together, okay, it's good for a little while, but you're going to burn the spot out eventually.
Yeah, 100%, man. That question why is the key. And the thing is that, people are always looking for the answer right away, and sometimes it doesn't come right away. I've had spots where it's taken me 2 seasons of asking why and going, well, I think it's because of this. And then the next season, I realized, oh, no, it wasn't because of that. Well, then why is it? I think it's because of this. And then the next season comes by, it's like, well, it wasn't that reason either. And then the third season comes along, I'm like, I think it's because of this. It's like Yahtzee. That's what it was.
It's usually about 3. It takes,
Yeah, 100%, man. Like that's usually my kind of, I guess, my running advice is any spot that's kind of new or whatever. I always say 3 years is about the amount of time to really kind of to feel like you start to have a opportunity to actually have real hunts, without just getting lucky,
Yeah, new areas or the spot itself, it seems to be about 3 years on average to really get grasp of what's going on and get a lot of confidence going into an area.
Yeah. So, all right. So we both run somewhere between 20 and 30 cameras on, I'm the same as you where it's like, I've got it in a couple different counties. It's, some big woods, some smaller, not smaller pieces, but smaller, relatively speaking, than some of the other pieces I have, cameras on. When you pull all that camera intel, how do you start? Because it can be a lot. It can be somewhat overwhelming because I run my cameras all year round. I don't any longer check them very often during the course of the year. I maybe will make a check like September just to see what deer are around because people have heard me talk about it, but I know you do a lot of the same. Because I'm working off of like a lot of long-term data where I'm watching spots year over year over year and getting a real good sense of how deer move and are using an area and stuff like that. So because of that, I always have a lot of trail camera pictures and stuff to go through. So how do you start analyzing those images and how do you start organizing them to start to kind of get a sense of understanding what's actually happening outside? Because I think so many people just look at the pictures like, oh, it's a big deer and he was in this area on this day, right? Yeah. But there's a much larger story to not just that picture, but when you start to group pictures together and start to group them together in like meaningful trends and looking at them that way.
Yeah, well, I break mine down basically in 3 ways because there's 3 different camera pulls that are important to me. First off, you have your summertime velvet picks. That's inventory, in my opinion. What am I going to be able to hunt this year? So you have that. Then you got your actual season where you're gaining historical data. And then the third part is after the season, what I got for next year, what made it. So that's kind of 3 things. That's the 3 things I kind of break down there. So I put it in the thirds there to kind of separate all that. And I'm the point now where, you got all these pictures to go through, stuff like that. I mean, I do like the cell cams, especially in season. It's nice just to download that HD image, and I save that to a folder. But even with my velvet picks and that, and the postseason picks, pretty much I'm just saving that pick and I'm putting it in a certain folder. My inventory is going to be in a certain folder. What do I got to hunt that this year? The postseason ones, they're in that folder for the upcoming season. But that in between period of the actual season historical data, I'm saving those buck pictures. Like I said, I don't hunt my cameras to kill a deer this year. It is long term.
Yep.
And here in Pennsylvania, once that deer gets 3-4 years old, it's really hard for them to get any older. Once the gun drives come in, they got some headgear. These guys push these cuts out, stuff like that. They usually get killed. So I'm not looking at my camera data for that deer. Occasionally, yes, I got deer that make it through, and of course, I got something on my hit list for next year. What I'm looking for is almost that camera data is telling me about the spot. Not so much the deer I'm focused on. I'm focusing those pictures on that spot. That's how I'm starting to break that down. If I have an area, and like I tell guys, my good rut setups, like I'm a rut hunter, so that's where we're going right here. That last 7 to 10 days of October, whole way through into Thanksgiving, maybe the first part of December, depending on the gun pressure, my good spots are going to be good through that period of time. But it's going to heat up somewhere in there probably, depending on the doe bedding and the does when they pop into heat. So I will pay attention to that in my camera data, stuff like that. When I start to see, I'm starting to say like, it might be, maybe it's November, just say 8th, 9th, 10th. All of a sudden I got 2-3 mature bucks at daylight. Well, I've got to take note of that. I'm not necessarily going in next year to kill one of those bucks, but I can guarantee you if the weather conditions, if we got cool weather, as long as we don't get a heat wave, that area is probably going to heat up around that same time period again. Like I said, a lot of my spots in general, I'm looking for maybe not a 3-day window most part. I'm looking for that 3, 4, 5 week period. Okay, I've had multiple shooters in this area over the course of the rut, pre-rut, rut. So I can start to break this area down where, because when it gets in the rut, I don't like to move a whole lot. I think that's what gets, especially in the big woods mountains, getting guys in trouble is moving a lot. So I'm already planning this upcoming year, okay, from this past year, historical data I've already gained from this last year, camera days, where these 5 or 6 stands, I'm probably going to have my ass in 2 or 3 days. Like, I already can tell you where my season's almost going to be leading up, when it hasn't even started yet. I haven't even got inventory for this year, but I can kind of tell you, if I get the right bucks in velvet, I'm pretty damn confident if I sit in these handful of spots over a course 3-4 weeks, I'm going to kill a buck. That's right. Kind of how I look into it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'm a lot the same, with one slight, I guess, variation. And I won't even say one slight variation. We're almost identical. I use my trail cameras, what I always have said for like the past couple of years is that I look for trends in areas and not so much deer, because same thing as you, where it's hard for me to get a deer season through season. Now, when it does happen, like in the case of this year, there's a deer or two that have my interest, where I'm like, you know what, I think I'm going to spend some time in this general, and it's also just happens to be an area that I've spent time scouting and I know, you know what I mean? Yeah. So where it's like, okay, I've got a deer who's made it. He's a good buck. I also know the area pretty okay because I've spent a fair amount of time there. I've run a fair amount of trail cameras in this general piece on I don't even know how many acres it is. And so I feel just good about it, being able to make a plan for that, particular area. But by and large, I do the same thing where it's like, I'm looking for those windows of like when things turn on, and I'm trying to get a sense of how does a particular area kind of change over the course of the year? Or is there a time where it's like, there's a week where it just goes dead? Because that was the one interesting thing about this year, is that I found a new little honey hole that I've hunted 2 years ago, I think. And I had a good encounter with a decent buck. Actually, I sent you a picture that year because I filmed him, and it was the first sit in that spot. I scouted the year before. It was the first sit, and an 8-point came through. He almost got some carbon. I sent you a picture of him. You were like, that was a good pass. You were like, that was a good pass. Like, that's like, one of those ones where it's like, but you were like, that was a good pass because he's got potential to be a real good, good deer in like the next, year or so. And then right after that deer came through, another buck came in, and him and I would have shot, just never got a shot, didn't get any film of him or anything. And I hadn't been back in there, and I had a camera in there. So I had like almost, I guess, 3 years of trail cameras info from that area. And then I went back in and checked it this year. I never got in there at all last year. And man, there are bucks in there daylighting from like September 27th, 28th, 29th, whatever it is, all the way through like Thanksgiving, basically up through gun season. You know what I mean? Yep. It's a big primary scrape.
When you see that,
And it's like, and the weird thing was that there was a 3-day window from like the 20th to like the 23rd where it just shut off, where there was nothing, which I thought was really kind of odd. I was like, I want to go back and look at the weather data and see if did it get real warm those couple of days or something like that, because it was like clockwork. Like every day they were coming through.
Or you had a couple of doe bedding area adjacent to that does came in early and drug some stuff over that way and heated up for a couple of days possibly.
Yeah.
Like we get into this trail camera stuff. Something that's really important with this, like we're talking about gaining this data, and this is something for me is really, really important. Is we're trying to figure out this time frame, these certain spots utilizing historical data. What's really important too is putting ass time in these areas. Is utilizing the camera data and the ass time together. That's why we're talking about like at 3 years. So that first year, say you got some cameras there. That second year, you get some ass time in there or so. Man, you start putting those two things together, what you see on the camera, because a lot of times I said the camera's only telling you a little bit. That's a small fraction of it. It's just giving you a ballpark. Then you put that ass time in there too in a certain location. That's when you get down to an area that is a kill tree, in my opinion. That's your top 5 spots. That's how you figure those areas out, where when you get a pocket full of those spots, a handful of those spots, you're going to consistently kill big whitetails every year, or whatever caliber whitetail you're after every year once you get that intel like that.
Yeah.
For a rut situation.
Yeah. And it's, what's crazy, what's weird is that for whatever reason, and it wasn't like I tried to do this. Well, part of it is like I'm gone during the rut. I'm usually always somewhere else during the rut for me. So most of my hunting time around here is October. And so I've just kind of been finding October spots, probably because I know I'm going to be here in October. And so it's like whenever I find those spots, it's like I kind of hold them really close, like, ooh,
Yeah.
like October, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like if I don't have that, I'm kind of up shit's creek, essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I won't see any deer because I'm going to be gone in part of November. So getting back to the trail cameras, how are you like looking at the data, or like how are you using your trail cameras to kind of to find like patterns, or in looking at deer behavior? Like, or is there anything from that perspective outside of just like the pattern of the area of like, hey, this is the timing when this place gets active, there's a lull here, then it picks back up or whatever, and you obviously see the caliber of deer are going to be in and around the area. What else from those pictures are you looking at from like identifying patterns or picking up on like the way deer want to act with each other, or like a specific deer is acting?
Like I said, I'm not a guy that's going to track all, like, I'm not going to sit there and figure all the weather patterns out and wind directions and all this little, like a big spreadsheet. I'm not going to do that with my pictures. I'm not going to do that. For whatever reason, I can usually remember a lot of stuff. Say I may look at a particular area, I might get some mature bucks on camera, and it's the last week of October and we have cold front come through. And I had multiple shooters show up in that general area. That's what in my head I'm keeping track of, stuff like that. I don't necessarily write stuff down, like I said, on a spreadsheet, not like that. I'm just too damn lazy, probably, maybe, but I'm a meathead, but for whatever dumb reason, I can remember a lot of this shit when it comes to whitetail and why. So I can like look at pictures, get an idea, and I can actually remember the weather for that certain time and know the areas that heat up at certain times of year a lot of times. And like I said, getting back even to the ass time, when you figure out, you can utilize your trail cam pictures in this, but usually it has to take ass time, is whenever you start knowing when them does are going to come heat in those certain bedding areas. That's huge once you can figure that out to an area, because you can really tie that in with a lot of things. It is a little hard with your camera data to pick that up. I think you do need to have some ass time to figure that out. But like I said, in general, like I said, I'm not a spreadsheet guy, but I'm just kind of say it's when I get multiple bucks daylight, in an area. I mean, like I said, I've always told before, I don't really care about nighttime picks too. That's important to me also. But when I start seeing mature bucks, multiple ones in a certain area, I'm going to start paying attention to that. And whatever reason in my head, I'm going to be like, okay, this time frame, 27th through Halloween of October, man, I had multiple bucks in here on this cold front. So the next year, I got to remember that. And guess what? If things work out from access and wind and all that, that's where I'm going to slip into that area and definitely hunt.
Right. Yeah. It's speaking of the, nighttime photos or nighttime images, I'm kind of similar to you where I pay attention to them almost from an inventory standpoint for that time of year. Like whatever, if it's during the season, because I look at it and go, okay, that's a buck, especially if he shows up consistently, multiple times, then I'm like, okay, he's somewhere, he's close-ish. You know what I mean? Like
quite a few bucks of nighttime only pictures. I tell guys, like, remember the camera's only telling you just a little bit.
Yes.
He might daylight 2 days in a row and just went around the camera. So you got to get in that tree in there. If he's consistently in there on cameras every couple of days, to me, you got to get in there and kill him.
Yeah. And then I get real excited if I see nighttime photos, and then I also get him during daylight as well. And then I'm like, that's whenever I'm like, sucker's living here. Like he's like, this is his block. You know what I mean?
You just go put some time in there then.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I have with this little honey hole that I found that's just consistent all of October and November. That's what I'm finding. Like there was a couple bucks. And the funny thing was that they all daylighted in October. I started getting nighttime photos or images of them in November, which was odd to me. I thought I'd have a better chance of getting them in daylight in October or in November, but they're so it tells me they're probably living not too far away from there for their fall range, like their core area of their fall range. It's kind of like their haunt. I think for me, like the one thing. Well, let me ask this: what's the percentage of cameras that you're running that you run on? Just straight picture mode versus video?
The cell cams, of course, say I run 30 cameras, a third of those might be cell cams. The other 2/3 video, standard SD. The standard SD, actually last year I did go run more picture mode because the damn lithium battery sucked.
Yeah.
So I was putting rare. And let me tell you what, I'd rather spend the money. It is what it is. Because not having video mode sucked. To me, you learn so much. You get so much awesome intel in video mode because that picture, just a little brief, even if it's burst mode, I can't tell you how many. I run mine on 30-second video. That last 5 seconds, there he is coming through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's something either doe went through or another little buck, and then here he comes through. So going into this year, my SD cams, say, like I said, 2/3 I'm running on standard SD cams. They're going to be in video mode. Cell cams, of course, I keep them, you know, on a picture mode, just for the reason being. And like I said, the cell cams, for me personally, a lot of times I do like to keep those in new areas, so that somebody doesn't go and steal my camera and I lose all that intel. That's a big plus I like about the cell cams.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The way because I used to run almost all mine on video mode, and I love video mode. And similar to you, you know, because I let mine out all season, a lot of them I don't even get back to. Yeah. I'm always worried that, you know, because some of them I'll set, you know, I set some this past weekend, you know, in beginning of May, you know what I mean? And some of those, and the ones I was checking, I set in May, and they just ran out like 2 weeks ago, ran out of battery. Yeah. You know, they made it almost a full year, you know, on picture mode. And I'm always worried about having because I don't get back to all of them, having a false trigger in there of like a leaf blown in front of it or something like that. Yeah, it happens, you know? And so what I started doing, especially in cameras that I know, if it's like those two that were way back in there, when I set those last year, I knew when I set those, I was like, I'm not going to make it back to these most likely, because I don't know anything about this area unless I'm just like not seeing anything where I think I should be hunting. I might take a flyer and come in here and hunt. But by and large, I don't plan to come back in here until next winter/spring to check the camera. And so they got solar panels, you know, and put it on picture mode because I didn't want, you know, the battery to get ate up.
I've been there too. Like
stuff like that.
If I know it's going to be in there for, like, if I'm putting it out and it's going to be there for 5-6 months, yes, I will go towards the picture mode. Like, now, if it's like, say, I pull a camp, like I like to check my, you know, put my cameras out in summer. I'll get velvet picks. End of August, first part of September, I pull that card, see what the inventory is. When I put new batteries, new cards in there, that's when I like to switch to video mode on a scrape. And then my plan on a lot of those is to get back to those right after bow season or before gun season, or immediately after gun season, like December. I want to pull those because, like I said, once they start getting past that, the card's usually full. Like you said, it triggers a lot more, use a lot more battery up. Even with the lithiums, I've had some problems. So I am similar. If it's going to be a really long soak, picture mode is probably the best way to go to cover your ass.
Yeah. The other thing I started doing too was when I've run, let's say, because the one thing I love, and this is to me is like the big value of two things that I found value in video mode, was one, I've been fooled so many times on thinking I know what direction a deer is coming from.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I run that same camera on video mode. Because say I find a really good buck and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to switch this to video mode now because I know there's like 2 good bucks in here. And I think he's coming from the north all the time because whenever the camera triggers, it looks like he's coming from the north. But then I finally get video of him, and every video I get of him, he's coming from the south. He just happens to show up in front of the camera like he was coming from the north, like for every picture, right? And all of a sudden, I figured out like, oh, all these deer are moving from the south. You know what I mean? Like, and so then all of a sudden, I got better direction, you know, travel direction. And then the other thing was too is that, and it's what helped me get on this deer that I bumped last year, on this new piece that I was hunting, that I knew that this one deer was aggressive, and he was the one who made a lot of scrapes because he was the only one typically that was always pawing and hitting the licking branch and just being really aggressive at the scrape. And so when I found some sign, and there's not a lot of sign in this area, and so when I found some, and I knew he was in this area the previous year because I caught him on camera on rut in this area. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, some really aggressive rubs showed up with just like, looked like brow tine gouges in it, and like a small scrape line opened up in this area. I was like, that's him. Like, cause he's one of the few deer that I see on camera consistently laying down scrapes. And I just kind of had a feeling. And then sure enough, I set up, you know, and I bumped him whenever I went in and whatever. And it was him, you know? And so it was that, like, watching him around other deer and how he was responding to the scrapes and how active he would be in making scrapes, what told me that was him, you know? Yeah. And so that's the other little piece that I pick up from video. But what I started doing was, once I have a place and I've qualified it with video and I get a good sense of like, okay, this is the travel route for these deer in this particular area and stuff like that, oftentimes then, and it's usually like 3 years, then I flip it to picture for the rest of the time. Cause now I'm like, okay, I know what's going on in this area. I know how they want to travel through this area. Now I just need to see what's here.
Yeah. More of an inventory thing again. Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right. So let's move to kind of now starting to combine that intel with your scouting, right? So how do you take what you're seeing on trail camera and then what you're seeing when you're scouting or when you're hunting, when you have, ass in the seat time? How do you start to make sense of all that stuff combined, to where it's like you start to see a little bit of a picture, right? Like how do you kind of combine those two, or what are you looking for? Maybe you have trail camera intel. What are you looking to kind of confirm or deny, or a hypothesis that you're trying to like debunk maybe when you're scouting?
Well, I mean, really, it probably starts with the scouting because, say, you initially find a spot. You get in there, like, this spot looks pretty damn good. Spotty sensor going. And like I said, a lot of times brand new areas, I don't always get ass time in that year, because I have other spots already in my catalog that I trust, I have a lot of confidence in. So, like, say I'm posting and scouting, that camera is going to confirm that sixth sense. It's going to confirm this is a good spot, okay? That first year, say, leaving that camera in there. Now, what I'll do, that'll carry on to the next postseason. So where I go back in there, okay, I found something pretty good here. The camera's telling me I found something pretty good. That's when that starts to get on more of that micro level now. Now I'm taking my time going in there and breaking this down to where I'm going to pick a tree or two out now. I'm going to come back here now the second season here. I'm going to hunt it. Now I'm going to put some ass time in there. Now that's confirming what I'm seeing, not only my scouting, now it's confirming my trail cameras too, what I'm seeing in there. And it's probably going to show me a little bit more. That ass time, you're not going to beat that. Scouting or trail cameras not going to beat the ass time, because that's when you're going to see the details of how that system, wherever's going on in there, is working. But you're utilizing your scouting and that trail camera data all to get to that ass time, to where that just confirms everything for me.
Yeah. It's I kind of similarly, but what I found this year for me was, because sometimes for me it happens backwards. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I don't see everything I need to see when I'm scouting. Like whenever I set the camera, and even when it tells me. So, like for example, I had a camera in this one area. It was good. There's a deer in there that I'd like to chase. I hunted that spot twice this year, I think. Twice this year, and had an encounter. I didn't see the deer. I saw a couple of does, and I heard like a buck grunting behind me and stuff like that. And there was some carrying on, and this was like October 5th or 6th, something like that. And let the camera run. Went back and grabbed it. This past winter, whatever that was, probably March, till I got in there to scout and pull that camera, and then did a little walk around and was with a buddy of mine. We were kind of talking about it, and I was just like, I had this buck that was behind me, and and then I had looked at the trail camera data, and like the one deer that I was kind of interested in and knew of, like he was on that camera, and the grunt that I heard was like really a deep guttural grunt that you don't hear often in PA. Like when you hear like a 2-year-old deer grunt, or even like a 3-year-old. Yeah. And if you've hunted the Midwest and you've heard like a real mature buck give you a grunt, like it just sounds different, Yep. And that's kind of what that sounded like, and so kind of stuck in my head, during the off season. And then when I pulled that camera and saw a deer that was on there, that I was like, oh, okay, it's mature deer. Started walking around, wasn't even really scouting, was just going to like this other area. I mean, I was scouting because I was walking through this area, but it wasn't like I was like, oh, let me go here and look. I was just that was my route of travel. And it was like, and I guess probably subconsciously did it because like that's kind of in the general area where I heard that grunt come from, Got in there, was like, boom, big rub. And I was like, I was like, okay. So now all of a sudden, like and then I went back and I looked at the trail camera data, and I saw like another image of like a different portion of the season. And I was like, okay, now it makes sense. You know what I mean? It was like that one little piece, and that's like starting to combine like what I was seeing on my trail camera, like the trail camera data because I still didn't really know how the deer were using this area 100%. Like I got them on camera and I kind of know what direction they're moving and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until like I saw multiple deer that I had on multiple cameras like in one day, where I would get them on this camera, and this camera, like 3 different cameras, within like a 2 or 3 hour period of time, where you could clearly tell this is how they're traveling, and then it's like, boom, found this rub over here. It's like, all right. And then look at the map. It's like terrain feature. Okay. Got it. Now I know what you're doing. Now I know how you guys are wanting to use this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
I actually had a similar situation. I've been running cameras in one area, and I continue to get mature bucks in this area. And the area looks good, but I can't, like, why? Why are you, like, so I actually took a day this postseason, made a big loop, and there was a real nasty steep terrain. It covered this river bottom system. And I'm thinking, the only reason I'm getting these mature bucks has to be because that type of security cover. But it was driving me nuts because I couldn't figure all this out. It was like that was the last piece of the puzzle. And I went in there, and sure as shit, it just all started clicking. Like, now I know why I'm getting mature bucks. But yeah, similar to you. Like, sometimes, yes, the picture itself, you're almost backtracking off of that to put them things together,
And sometimes the picture itself will give you the reason to go back and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Because if you, this particular spot, or this particular piece, it's like there's a handful of like mature deer that I've had on camera for 3 seasons. Not all of them, not the same deer for 3 seasons, but I've had mature deer year over year for 3 seasons, always kind of using this piece. And it was because of that where I was like, I need to just spend some time walking around here, because there's a reason why these mature deer are spending time in this general area, Yeah. And I thought it was always the more pressured area too, which is why the first year I stayed away from it. I hung cameras, but I didn't bother with it because I was like, that's the easiest place to hunt. It'll be pounded. There won't be any good deer there. It's the opposite, which like blew me away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, I'm curious, man, how much, because this was something that I did and I haven't always done it this way. I've done this for individual deer in the past. Like, I think people are pretty, familiar with finding a deer they want to kill. Right. And then going, all right, there's this deer that I want to kill, and I'm going to look at the wind data, for all the daylight pictures I have of him. And he likes, when he's coming from the north, he likes this wind, and when he's coming from the west, he likes this wind, and then he's only daylighting on like a west and a southwest or whatever it is. Right. And then, which I've done for specific deer, and I've done for, a couple of deer that I have that I'm very specific on this year. But what I also started doing is I started grouping all my pictures together. Like that honey hole spot is like one of the places I did it for recently. And I took all the shooters that I had, and I wanted to see not just how does an individual deer use it, but I wanted to see a larger data set of how do all the deer that are quality deer for that spot, how do they use it? Yeah. And so I took all those pictures and I looked at all the weather data for those pictures, daylight pictures, what the wind was directionally, what the wind speed was when they were moving in daylight, and started looking at the spot, like what does it take for a good deer to want to be vulnerable in this spot? Right. Yeah. And it's crazy because what I found was almost 100% in this particular area. I won't say 100%. I want to say it was 60% of the time that a daylight shooter walked in October, it was always one wind 60% of the time. That was the wind that they were using. And the wind speed for each one of those times was between 10 and 15 miles per hour. In the instance that they would show up in daylight in that same wind direction, if the wind speed was below 10 miles per hour, was way less. Yeah. And so I started kind of looking, and so I started nerding out a little bit. Yeah. So go ahead.
I don't go into that depth of it, just me personally. A big factor for me though is weather. Weather, the seasonal temperature. To me, the only thing that trumps weather is heavy gun pressure. Which, of course, during a bow hunter, we don't typically need to deal with that.
Right.
Sometimes your specific spot may get some pressure and it screw that spot up. But in general, as a bow hunter, outside pressure like that, usually we can work around stuff. So the number one factor to me is air temperature, is the weather. When it's hot, can you kill them? Absolutely, but it's going to be slow. As a rut hunter, my style of hunter, hunting the rut. I don't like to hunt a particular one thing. I like multiple things coming together. So the wind, the thermals, of course I'm hunting with common sense. My hunting
for sure.
I am an aggressive hunter now. I am aggressive, but I get in a situation, a rut, where they're going to come from multiple different areas, I feel. So I'm not so much sometimes worried about, like I said, I'm aggressive. So sometimes he is getting the wind to his favor. I like to flirt with the devil there a little bit in situations. But what a good rut day for me is typically the weather. I mean, if you get the weather lines up. If we, like this last year was kind of mediocre, a little hot and cold. I'm telling you, going into 2024 here, if we get a cold snap, Halloween, that last week of October, you get a cold snap, there's going to be some big deer die. Because right when they're starting to look for them first couple of days, they're going to die. And then as you stretch in through November, if the weather cooperates, you're going to see a lot of guys are going to have an awesome season. It's just plain simple. Look back at 2022. 2022 was a miserable freaking bitch because it was freaking 70-some freaking degrees every damn day. End of the day, weather trumps everything, in my opinion. And like I said, my style hunting, I don't break it down to that part. Should I? Maybe. But just my style. Like I said, I have 5 or 6.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
spots,
I don't. Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily need to. I think that, and this is just my opinion.
If you're hunting a particular deer that could change now. Now I will say that you're hunting a specific deer. You've had his number for 1, 2, 3 years. You're chasing them. I don't care if it's farm country, hill country, mountains. That's a little different. You're trying to find that last piece of puzzle. Me, I'm just looking for opportunity. So that's probably why I don't care so much with those details.
Right. Yeah, and I think the difference too is a little bit is when I do that for a particular area and I'm looking at like how to mature or good bucks in general use this area specifically, people listening, it's like, remember, I'm talking like October because I'm not here in November. So I'm thinking like the first 3 weeks of October is when I want to try to kill a deer here.
Yes.
Right.
Where they're a little bit more patternable. Yeah.
Right. And so, if I can get a sense of like, they want to be in this area with a south wind always, and 10 to 15 miles per hour. And I'm looking to try to figure out, because during that time of year, I'm spot hopping, like, because I've run cameras in these areas on these scrapes long enough that I know there's one spot where I killed my buck this year. That place turns on every year between the 15th and the 18th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've had encounters with deer on the 16th and the 18th for 4 years in a row. You know what I mean? Or 4 years. I think 4 years. 3 years in a row. Or was it 4? I don't know. It's 3 or 4. I can't remember how many years. But it's that time frame every year. And so I'm going to be there as long as I have the right wind to hunt that spot. And so now I have this other spot that I know, okay, this is good all of October. And if I want to kill a good deer in this area and want a chance to kill a good deer, here's this is the wind that they want to be on, and this is the speed that they're going to want to use if I'm prioritizing, right? Because it's like I'm going to look for like I'm going to take a day off, for example, right? It's like, I'm going to get just say it was a east wind. I'm going to get an east wind and on Thursday, but it's only going to be light and variable, high of 5 mile per hour. Or Friday, I'm going to get an east wind and it's going to be 10 to or it's going to be 12 to 15 or 12 to 16 or whatever. It's like, well, I'm going to take Friday off instead. You know what I mean? Because that's the day that lines up with what I've seen.
I've actually not necessarily a certain deer or whatever, just deer in general. I've seen certain things over the years, especially you were talking about like at mid-October towards like Halloween. Actually the front end of the fronts, end of them, that's when I see the big ones up on their feet. That's when I've gotten the trail cameras. I've seen them. I've had instances where it's like, whatever, third week, whatever, getting into October around the 20s, whatever it is. And it's 75 degrees. It's warm. It's muggy, but there's a thunderstorm running in. And then there's a cold front coming in behind it. It was actually, I've seen bucks daylighting, still warm out ahead of that front, just when the rain's starting to come in, hitting scrape, stuff like that. So stuff like that I've seen in October. The other thing too, you're talking about the wind, that 10, 15 mile. To me, I don't want calm. I want windy. It can be 30 mile an hour winds. I don't give a shit. I've seen so many big bucks when it's windy. Sometimes it does suppress the deer movement if it gets real windy, but I've seen some of the biggest bucks I've seen in Pennsylvania when it's been windy and shitty, like that. But that 10 to 15 up to 20, I'll take that all day. That's when I see a lot of great movement.
Yeah, and I just started recently. I started paying attention to it a couple years ago, not as intently as I did this particular off season. Because Chad and the guys at Exodus, they did a big look back on all their trail camera data. I think it was like maybe 2 years ago. It might have even been 3 years ago, where they did do like a wind study and look at, you know, when they saw the biggest, like the most mature deer most frequently kind of in daylight, and what was the wind speed and stuff like that, and kind of looked at it. And it was always over 10, I think it was 10 or 15 miles. I can't remember exactly.
Digits, I like, yep.
You know, that was kind of like the sweet spot where it was like, and if you think about it, it makes sense, right? It's like we want a predictable wind, so we can understand as a hunter how we're going to play that prevailing, and also how we're going to how the thermal is going to react wherever we're at, what the thermals are going to do, so we can kind of get a sense of what that wind is going to do in the spot that we're going to be in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Deer the same way. They don't want a light variable wind either. They can't, you know, they can't, if they're headed from south to north and they've got a north wind, but it's 2 mile per hour and variable, well, they can't smell like very well because they can't get a good scent of like how far in front of them, I mean, right? But if they get a stiff wind from the north, like 10, 15 mile per hour, man, it's like they can smell everything in front of them, no problem. You know, it's going to be consistent for them, you know?
Yeah. I tend not to get busted on days like that, especially when it's cold, you know, and you get that cold, dry air and it's windy. I tend not to get busted then, you know, it seems to be in our favor then.
Yeah, but if you get that little bit of moisture, they can smell a little bit better. And if you can cut the wind just right, dude, you know, that's like they think they got all the confidence in the world because it just heightens it. But so cool, man. So we got our trail camera data now, man. We've done our scouting and we've put some other puzzle pieces together because we saw some trail camera data and we reinvestigated and now we've kind of merged everything together and we have a good sense of what's happening, right? So now, like, how do you start? Because you were saying earlier, like, you have your 20, and I kind of have my plan mapped out too, you know? So I'm just curious, like, how are you mapping out your plan? Like, how do you start to lay the foundation of what am I going to do, you know, whenever October rolls around next year? And I know you're more of a rut hunter, but I know you hunt the whole season. So what is your game plan? How are you going to attack the season with the intel that you have and make that plan?
I mean, like, the early part of the season's always, you know, I'm not really an early season hunter because where I work, where my big bucks are, it's hard to get there. So it's kind of limited to Saturday sometimes. So a lot of times I'm hunting some farm country, kill some doe, stuff like that. But if I am going after a mature buck early part of October, you know, that's where some of my trail cam data from the summer, maybe early fall, is going to come and play. Okay, I have this bedding area. There's there's 2 mature bucks in there. That's when I'm going to get into the bed game. I'm going to get aggressive, get close to the cover, stuff like that. Maybe that first scrape, that first oak, you know, dropping off of that. Kind of that's where even a little bit more of my in-season scouting is going to come into play, that first part. But I'm going to tie that in with my trail cameras from the velvet picks and stuff like that, knowing what's in the general area. But as the season progresses, once it starts getting into, I mean, mid-October, I always said it, you know, if I run 30 cameras, there's going to be 2 or 3 of them. There's going to be bucks daylighting on them son of guns consistently mid-October. Problem is, it's just such a small percentage of those cameras. That is where, if you are running a cell cam, you could utilize that. I don't like to do that, just me personally. But if you can pick up on that mid-October, 13th, 15th, 16th, whatever in there, I've seen some big bucks daylight in that time frame. But as you get in the 20s, that's where now I'm utilizing those past season or 2 historical for that area, you know, kind of mature bucks showing up in that general location and general area. What did my velvet inventory tell me? Okay, what do I got to hunt? You know, is there actually bucks in this general area I can hunt? You start tying that in. Then I start making a plan, you know, where I'm going to be towards the end of October. Once I start getting into probably that last handful of days in October, now you're getting into my game. Probably like where I killed my buck this year. That place there, it's good from velvet till about Halloween. It just lit up. I will be spending some time there again this year. Already guarantee it. As long as the wind lines up, I will be in that spot. As it heats up, if I still got a tag in my pocket as we get in November, that's when I'll start going back on that historical data from the cameras, from ass time, stuff like that, to where, okay, it's November 1st. We go out the 19th or 20th of November. So say I got 20 days there, you know, almost 4 weeks. I'm going to start 3 weeks there. I'm going to start figuring out what is my best 5-6 stands, you know what I mean? And that's probably where I'm going to try to put a lot of my time in. And that's where, like I said, that trail camera data, the velvet inventory, okay, what's in this area? Because I don't really want to hunt one buck. I like to get in an area where it has multiple shooters because I have multiple opportunities in. If you sit in the travel hub, I have 3-4 shooters in that general area. There's a pretty good chance in about 2-3 days somebody's coming by probably.
Right.
That's kind of how I play that game, utilizing all that data.
Yeah. Nice, man. Yeah, it's funny how like there's so much that we do the same. And but then there's still like so much that we're different.
Everybody has their little things. Like I have 2 spots this year. I got 2 spots I have 0 ass time in. One spot I have not run a camera. The other spot I ran a camera not very far. When I pulled that camera, I was very surprised the amount of mature bucks I had on that camera. But everything kind of lines up this other. There's 2 ridge systems. I'm telling you, like I've not put 1 minute in it. And it's very important to me putting ass time a tree to get really confident in an area. But I have 2 places this year. If I get on these ridge systems and if I have shooters, I'm killing one. I'm telling you, I'm killing one. That's how much confidence I have in these 2 ridge systems. I will kill one.
Sometimes it just lines up, like you just get a feeling.
Everything's there.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, I don't need to see anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you're getting daylight pictures of mature bucks, like I said, guys understand Pennsylvania, 3.5, 4.5, that's mature buck, 130, 140 inches. But I'm getting daylight pictures of them during gun season. I know I'm in the spot.
Yeah.
Nobody's going there.
100%. So
they know that. These whitetails know that. Now I know that.
Right. Yeah. So what's interesting, man, for me making my plan this year, because and the reason why I hit you up and I was like, dude, we got to talk, because I go through like these ebbs and flows where, if I have a reason to make a really hard, steadfast plan, like last year I didn't make any. Like I was like, no, I'm just going to hunt. And I know some good spots that I like. And I had some cameras in them and stuff like that. Didn't check them. And I was like, I'm just going to go hunt because I know these couple areas are good. And I don't care what deer is there. I don't even really know what deer's in the area. But I know it'll be good. Kind of like how you're talking about that ridge system, right? It's like, it just things line up and I know it's good, right? And then there's other years like this year where it's like I am making a plan because I feel like I have some really good, I have the drop on them in a couple spots, what I mean? Where I'm like, oh man, you have shown too much, you know what I mean? Type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so what I started doing this year was looking at my trail camera data, thinking about the scouting that I did and the stuff that I'd seen, boots on the ground, thinking about ass time as well, like what I'd seen, like in the places that I'm kind of considering hunting this year. And it's really kind of, I will say 1, 2, 3, 4 spots overall that are like, that I'm probably going to spend most of my time. When I say most of my time, it's really just October and then late season, essentially. Yeah. What I started doing in the areas that I'm really, really interested in, like there's 2 spots where I'm like, this is where if I could spend every day, I would spend every day in these 2 spots. What I started doing was looking at the weather, like I was talking about before, looking at like wind speeds and wind direction, stuff like that, getting a sense of like what they're doing, how they're using the area, what directions they're traveling, what time they're traveling from what direction and stuff like that, to get a sense, like a strong sense of like bed and like where they're traveling in the evenings and stuff like that. And that's the other benefit of nighttime footage. If you have day and night, it's like you get a sense of like to and fro, you know what I mean? Like you get a really good idea. And then the other thing I started looking at, and it just dawned on me today, because I started thinking about like, okay, what days next year am I going to just like take off that aren't part of like my rut trip, that are going to be just like days I'm going to take around here to try to kill. And it's going to be around some days that I know that I'm getting daylight activity and stuff like that. But in my mind, I was like, man, what day of the week was that this year? Because I was curious, like why were they visible during those particular days? And so I went and looked, and I was like, they're active on a day that follows heavy activity, right? Like a known heavy activity day, right? Yeah. And every time I had them in daylight, or these daylight, like mature deer in daylight, it was always after like an event, like every time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, so I'm actually not going to hunt the Saturday, or the Friday, like the weekend, essentially. I was like, that daylight was on a Monday. Yeah. 2 years in a row. Yeah. The same Monday. right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right, I got you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I went and looked at like the next daylight photo I got,
Yeah.
and I was like, all right, what day of the week was that? And I was like, oh, okay, it's that day. I'm like,
Well,
okay.
shit.
I was like, and so I started like piecing together, like, it's not just like the weather and stuff like that, and this is, and I don't get like this very often, but this is just one of those instances where it's like things started lining up and started
Yeah.
making sense. And I just asked a lot of questions, and it was like, well, it can't be this. It can't be this. And then when I started getting, like, I had a sense of what was going on, and I started looking at wind then I was like, oh man, let me see what was going on. Like, well, what day of the week is that? Cause I think that's the thing, like, people forget about. They look at a photo and they go, oh man, this deer was active on October 23rd, right? Well, if you're in Pennsylvania and it's a Sunday, right? It's like, well, yeah, because there's no pressure in the woods.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Like, he just got pressured Friday, Saturday. And it's the beginning of like scrape week. So of course, like, wherever he's living, got piss pounded by people for 2 days.
Yeah.
And it finally let up on Sunday or Monday. And now he's visible. Right. So, or it's Monday. Right. And like, and he's visible. Right. And so it's like, well, yeah. And say that's like, and so next year that Monday is going to be the 24th. So you can't hunt him the 23rd. You got to hunt him the 24th. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, and so you have to think about like, what is that day the following year?
Yeah. I mean, during the week is typically when I kill one.
Yeah, that's it.
When I kill one. Yeah.
Yep. And
I know one buck back here I killed on a Saturday. Everything's pretty much been a weekend deal. You know what I mean? That's, or a weekdays, deal. Just they know when that pressure sets in, on a Saturday or stuff like that. Friday evening. I've seen that. Yeah. I've seen that many times.
Yeah. And that's my favorite time is middle of the week, week and mornings in October.
Yeah.
Oddly enough,
Yeah. Like I said, we don't deal with the bows, not as bad as like the gun pressure, you know what I mean? But it can be area specific, a spot where
I was just going to say, around. Like back, like in my area, because the public in my local area is not as vast as what you guys have out in your part of the state. Yeah. And so the bow pressure around me is pretty good. Yeah. To where it's not as bad as gun, right? But it's still, it's pretty significant. And so during bow season, it's like, I'm typically looking at, I prefer to take Wednesdays and Thursdays to try to kill a deer starting on Tuesday. If like the wind and everything, if that's the day, cause there've been studies and they show that places that, just in general, deer go into hiding on Friday because people hunt after work. The weekend starts Saturday, Sunday, they move the least. Monday, they move a little bit more because people are out of the woods. It takes them Tuesday, they reacclimate. Then by Wednesday, Thursday is when they move the most, or those 2 days, right? And it's because they've gotten relief from pressure. People aren't around as much. So now I feel a little bit more free. I'm going to move. And so those are the days I usually take off whenever I'm hunting around here in October. And it's usually a morning because even fewer people are out and they seem almost like, they seem almost like at ease in the morning, like not a care in the world, know? So now that we have our plans, man, how are you executing your plan this fall? Like, what's like when it comes down to brass tacks? What is the thing? The final kind of touches to execute that hunt plan.
It's just going to come down to, I mean, to be honest with you, it's just the confidence I have in an area. Like I said, if we get into the rut situation, I'm going to have a pocket full of spots that it might be a few more. Just depends how the season plays out, my intel for velvet picks and stuff like that. But when I go into a spot, it's going to be the confidence level I have going in there to kill. When you get in that time of year, man, it's all mental. It is. You just got to keep your head screwed on right. Go in there and hunt your ass off. You do. Because typically for guys like us, average guys, sometimes you got a season. It took you 5 days to punch a couple tags, but normally for a lot of us guys, it's going to be 15, 20, 25 days until that opportunity comes by. And you got to realize that going into, you can have the best plan in the world, but at the end of the day, man, you just got to be confident. You got to be willing to grind it out and just stay mentally focused,
Yeah, especially that rut time period, man. Like that's the part, that's the part for me where it's, you got to be in it. Like just every day. I think for me, the earlier part of the year, is probably more about being adaptable, because things are going to, like the food's going to change that time of year and stuff's going to change. But like when it comes down to the rut, it's more just about, to your point, it's persistence. You know what I mean? It's like just staying after. I mean, you have to adapt as well, just depending on where you're at. Like Kansas definitely is like adaptation is part of like rut hunting out there, especially if you're doing the glassing and stuff like that, because you don't know where they're going to pop up. You just got to be able to kind of shift gears and go where they're going to go. You know, big woods, to your point, rut, I'm the same way. It's like, I'm going to have a handful of spots, and wherever the wind's right for those couple spots to kill either the deer, the general deer of good deer that I have that I know of, or a specific deer, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be in those handful of spots.
That's the game. That's the game. Yep. Nice,
man. So, so you're feeling pretty good for next year. So you're hunting PA, right? You going anywhere else? Any out of staters?
I'm going to go down Maryland. My plan is to go down to Dickinson in September. I'm not very far from Maryland border, so I'm not going to be picky down here. I'm going to go down and have some fun. I got a couple, 3-4 weekends I get down there. I think they can hunt some Sundays too, so I'm going to go down there. I'm not going to be trophy hunting. I'm going to tell you right now, that first little 6-point comes by, he may come home. You know,
he's in the truck, boy.
I want to get out and have some fun, man. You get back here, pack back in, kind of, I don't know what their game was. I got to go to the laws, but it's kind of one of those quarter them up, skin them out, hike them out of there, go home or whatever, But I think I'm just going on there and have fun. Now I get on there a couple years, get to know the area. Yes, I will be picking, but I just get on and have some fun. PA, of course, I'm very blessed what I killed last year. I will hold out for something probably bigger this year. That is my plan. Things change. You get tied in the emotions of this sport or hobby we do, passion, whatever. Things can change, but I plan on holding out for something pretty good here in PA. Then after Pennsylvania, if I'm blessed to tag one here early in PA, I probably will jump to Ohio, do a little hunting there, possibly if I get one killed here in PA. The other thing I'll do is I'm heading to New York, do some gun hunting. Their gun season comes in like before ours. I think it's before Thanksgiving, whatever it is, the weekend before. I'm going to go up there, take the rifle up there, just hike back in, hunt there for 2 to 3 days. And like I said, I'm going to be a little pickier there than Maryland, but not that picky. I told you. I've kind of learned I'm a deer hunter. Like I said, after this past year, after actually the last 2 seasons have probably been my toughest seasons. I've killed a lot of deer the last 2 years, a lot of doe and that. I only killed that one buck last year. I kind of got tied up in a lot of this stuff, chasing the prize. And I needed to take a step back, got my balls kicked in Iowa, realized I'm a deer hunter. I'm going to go deer hunt. I'm going to have fun. That's what I want to do, enjoy this. Because when I did that before, it seemed to be that's when the big bucks started coming around.
Yeah, it's funny how things work out, isn't it?
Yes.
I think my plan for this year is, there's a couple good bucks that I would really like to see. We'll see if that pans out or not. I'm also probably going to carry a longbow this year, and so I keep telling myself, I may not make it to
make it harder, buddy.
I was like, I may not make it to even try to see one of the ones I want to see, because I was like, that would be a hard time. Because I'm going to go out the early season, try to, I feel pretty good with it. If you asked me to go on a hunt right now with it, I'd probably tell you no. I'd probably pick up my compound. But I'm killing stuff from 26 yards. I'm shooting back to 30.
That's
and I'm okay. I'm not as consistent as I would like to be at like 30 yards or 26 yards. But basically anything 20 and in, like I'm pretty good. I feel like, you get me to September when my season comes in middle of September, like I should be good. So a couple of the early hunts around here, that September timeframe, I got a couple spots. I specifically I threw a camera up, literally knowing I was going to make that longbow transition, or going to try to. I threw a couple cameras up that I thought, man, this looks like some area where I feel like there'd just be a lot of does, like every day. Yeah. Right.
Oh, I'm killing does this year, buddy. I feel bad for the does.
And so I did that specifically, and I pulled that camera this off season, and I looked at it, and it was just does every single day. And I was like end of September, I was like, I'm going to be in there with a longbow trying to get a couple on the ground,
man, that's sweet. That'd be awesome, man.
To get some confidence. And then we'll see. But the funny thing is, there's 2 actually good bucks in there. I don't know if they made it or not. Well, that's what I said. I was like, they're not the caliber of the couple mature ones that I'm kind of like focused in on. But it'd be real hard for me to pass them with a longbow, is what I'll say. You know what I mean? If that would be my first longbow kill, you count me a happy man.
I'm not quite ready for the. I dabbled a little bit last year. I really can't hit nothing with it yet. I think eventually I am going to go that route. It is my plan. I'm going to cross a couple things off the bucket list with whitetails. And then I think I am eventually going to go that way. That is my plan down the road here. But I need to either go to somebody like Nathan Killen or, other guys you've been around, like, okay, let's go to we need to pick the bow out. I have no clue what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Dude, I need something to know what they're doing. So I know, like, okay, it's not the bow, it's my dumb ass.
Right. Yeah, man. That was the one thing for me. Like, because I had talked to Nathan about it a couple times, just, he and I chatting about it or whatever. The big thing for me and I agree with you. It's not like a compound, where, look, people who've never shot a compound before, I'm sure it's daunting as well to just pick up a compound and go to a shop and you don't know anything or whatever. But a traditional bow is even more finicky because not every shop has a guy who knows what they're doing with a traditional bow and whatever. And so it kind of makes it even more like intimate because like you usually have to have like a guy who's willing to kind of be your mentor almost, what I mean? Yep. And you don't have to, but it certainly helps. You can figure this stuff out on your own, but and I had my buddy Todd Freeman, lives in Jersey.
Yes. Yeah,
good friends with good friends with Greg Litzinger, is like we're all buddies. And he doesn't live far away from me, about an hour. And he'd been on me for a couple years about it, and he was like, look, I got a bow you can use. Like my dad gave me 2 recurves and I've played around with those in the yard. I was actually just shooting one today. But I knew I was like, I didn't really want to shoot a recurve. I kind of wanted a longbow, and I don't know why. I realized why when I picked it up for the first time and shot it just felt better. And I thought it might, cause I was like, the recurve always just felt a little odd to me. Like I just didn't like shooting it as much. And as soon as I picked up that longbow, like I just liked shooting it, you know? I don't know if because, the recurve I have is actually a little shorter than my longbow. And so I don't know if like the draw angle of it, like just made it more uncomfortable for me. And like the string angle of it made me uncomfortable. And like the string angle of the longbow is like not as steep. And so it just feels better. But going to him and having him kind of show me, hey, here's how you make an arrow. And he actually had an old bow. He was like, he's like, just take this one. You can have it. Yeah. He's like, use it, hunt with it. He's like, if you have one made or you buy a different one, whatever. He's like, I don't need this one back. He's like, gift it to somebody else that wants to get into it so they have a bow to start with or whatever. And so I just went to him and he taught me how to make an arrow, how to tune an arrow. And, and then got me on target, and that was the biggest thing of just getting an arrow made so I could shoot consistently and be on target. And then, it was like, you're on your way, like now just start shooting every day, and that's what I did. I put a bag target in my basement, in my archery room. That way on days when it's raining and stuff like that, I go downstairs and I shoot, just put arrows in the bag, to just keep releasing. And then, and so I feel good. So you're right. Like it is a lot easier if you have somebody, hopefully maybe I'll get my custom one made, and then, and I can pass this one to you,
There you go.
And it'll just make its rounds,
That's pretty sweet.
But it's cool, man. I think you would dig it, and I could definitely see you doing it.
I'm digging that woodsmanship stuff and that. And I think it's just there's something about that, just that kind of I'm so big on the woodsmanship of it. Like, and woodsmanship isn't just chasing after whitetails, and just something about that. I mean, it would just really top it all off for me.
Right. I'll tell you what, though. I take that longbow out this year consistently, and I promise you, I will see the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life in Pennsylvania, and he'll be 30 yards away.
You can guarantee that.
Just out of range.
I guarantee it. Yeah. That's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I was like, so we'll see. It's going to make its way into the woods a couple times. I'm just, debating whether or not it makes it whenever it's like kill time, if I'm going to feel confident enough with it, and whether or not it makes it to Missouri with me or not, because Chad and I are headed back out there. Yeah. And I hit one the last time I was there and lost it. I know there's big deer in this particular area, and I'm kind of like, man, I want to redeem myself. So I kind of,
fun.
Yeah. So we'll see. Time will tell. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying yes right now. I'm being a politician. Awesome, buddy. Well, hey, man. Kept you here about an hour and a half, buddy. It's always good catching up with you. Good to see your face. Hope to we ran into each other at Harrisburg, but I hope to see you again before Harrisburg next year. Before you get out of here, let people know where they can follow along with what you have going on and anything you want to make people aware of.
You can follow me on Instagram at Moose1720.
Nice. Give him a follow. He's always showing awesome deer stuff, his scouting, giving you his mental dump of what's going on, and getting inside of his brain. So I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.